Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, the Trump administration signals a major escalation in its attacks on alleged drug boats coming into the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth deployed an aircraft carrier strike group to the waters off of Central and South America, bringing thousands of American troops into the region as the U.S. conducts its 10th strike on an alleged drug boat. President Trump cuts off trade talks with Canada over an anti-tariff ad featuring former President Ronald Reagan. Trump now accusing one of America's closest allies of cheating. Meanwhile, a new report shows inflation climbing at its fastest rate since January. A not guilty plea from New York Attorney General Letitia James to bank fraud and making a false statement. James, one of President Trump's top targets, is accusing the Justice Department of using her as a tool of revenge. New body camera footage shows a former NFL quarterback's DUI arrest. And he's one of the most notable actors of this generation. And now Ethan Hawke is opening up about his latest role, one he says was his most difficult, bringing a musical legend back to life.
It was so much fun. I was basically like, I've spent 30 years acting, and each job I kind of learned one little tool to put in my toolkit, you know, and then this movie required all of them to be in use.
From ABC News, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alex Berche in for Linsey. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We begin tonight with the Trump administration and a major show of force in its military crackdown on suspected drug boats allegedly headed to the U.S. The Pentagon is now deploying an entire aircraft carrier group to the waters off of Central and South America. The move comes hours after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posted new video showing the latest strike on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean. At least 6 people were killed, the boat said to be out of Venezuela. It's the third such attack this week and the 10th since the operation began last month. The USS Gerald R. Ford carrier group is headed to the region with thousands of U.S. troops on board. Sources telling ABC News that 2 B-1 bombers flew missions over the Caribbean yesterday, and last week 3 B-52s were operating in international waters off Venezuela. President Trump previously said that he was not ruling out possible ground attacks against suspected cartels and drug traffickers. Chief Global Affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz leads us off.
Tonight, a U.S. aircraft carrier and multiple warships now steaming towards the Caribbean. A dramatic escalation in what President Trump calls his war on drug cartels. This as a deadly new airstrike obliterated a suspected drug boat. Secretary Pete Hegseth posting video of that overnight attack, the boat taking a direct hit, exploding in flames. Hegseth saying at least 6 people were killed, claiming without evidence the boat was being operated by Tren de Aragua, a designated terrorist organization. It's the 10th known military attack on alleged drug boats, including 2 in the eastern Pacific Ocean off Central America. And tonight, the orders for that new, ferocious show of force. The USS Ford carrier strike group heading to the region. That carrier bristling with firepower, including F-18 fighter jets, missile launchers, and attack submarines, adding some 5,000 American forces to the 10,000 already in the region. President Trump, who has said land attacks could be next, pressed if he will seek a declaration of war.
I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country.
While the vast majority of Republican lawmakers support the president's actions against cartels, concern is growing.
You can't randomly just blow up the enemy without identifying them and accusing them of crime unless you're at war.
And Martha Raddatz now joins us from Washington. Martha, this carrier now signals a new threat from the president, right?
It sure does, Alex. We've seen these airstrikes again and again on those boats the administration says are carrying drugs. But President Trump is now threatening land strikes on drug cartels, which those fighter jets on the carrier are fully capable of carrying out. Alex?
All right, Martha Raddatz, thank you. Next tonight, to an escalation of a different kind. President Trump cutting off trade talks with Canada. The president furious over an anti-tariff ad airing in the U.S. featuring former President Ronald Reagan. And it comes amid a new report showing inflation climbing to 3% last month compared to a year ago. Americans are paying more for beef, coffee, and produce. President Trump had campaigned on lowering prices. Here's Elizabeth Schulze from the White House.
Thank you.
Tonight, President Trump abruptly launching a new trade war with Canada, declaring all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. The president infuriated by this ad produced by the province of Ontario, which uses the words of former President Ronald Reagan.
High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars.
Trump posting accusing Canada of trying to illegally influence the United States Supreme Court, which is set to hear arguments in 2 weeks on whether the president's sweeping tariffs are constitutional. Canada's prime minister sounding resigned.
We can't control the trade policy of the United States.
Trump's tariffs are now beginning to affect the prices we pay for everything from furniture to clothes to groceries. A new government report shows inflation is picking up, prices increasing 3% from last year. The typical American household is now spending an extra $208 per month. Trina Duda, a mother of a second grader, says she's feeling it.
This gallon of milk is $2 more than it was.
Like a month ago, yeah.
At the grocery store, tariffs are hitting imported foods. Coffee prices surging 41% in the past year. Lettuce up 21%. Sirloin steak up 20%.
How much did you pay for your groceries today?
$55.
More or less than last month?
Maybe 5 or 10% more.
That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah. I'm not happy with it.
It comes as the government shutdown drags into day 24 with no end in sight. Today, more than 500,000 workers missed their first full paycheck, many of them employees at the Pentagon, HHS, and the VA. Another 700,000 plus people will miss their first full paycheck next week. At this food bank in Alexandria, Virginia, a furloughed worker at the Department of Defense telling us that she feels like a pawn in the game.
This distribution's happening every Friday as long as the government shutdown happens.
Furious that lawmakers are getting their paychecks, but she's not.
They need to go without a paycheck. They need to get low on food so they can understand what we're dealing with. It's not fair. It's just not fair.
And Elizabeth Schulze joins us now from the White House. And Elizabeth, do we know if Democrats and Republicans are even talking right now?
Alex, day 24 of the shutdown, and right now Republicans and Democrats don't even seem to be talking. And President Trump leaves tonight for a summit in Asia. Alex.
All right, Elizabeth Schulze, thank you. Here in New York, Attorney General Letitia James has pleaded not guilty to federal charges of bank fraud and making false statements in Virginia. James, one of President Trump's top targets, is accusing him of using the Justice Department as a tool of revenge. Professor at Hofstra Law and ABC News contributor James Sample is standing by to discuss what's next in this case. But first, here's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas.
Tonight, a defiant New York Attorney General Letitia James pleading not guilty to federal charges after President Trump urged his Justice Department to go after her.
So there's no fear today. No fear. No fear. No fear. No fear. Because I believe that justice will rain down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Preach.
James, a target of the president ever since she brought a $500 million civil fraud case against Trump and his family. Trump publicly urged Attorney General Pam Bondi to prosecute her.
It looks to me like she's very guilty of something, but I really don't know.
The veteran prosecutor investigating James determined there was not enough evidence to bring charges, so Trump forced him out, quickly installing his own former personal attorney, Lindsey Halligan, an insurance attorney who has never prosecuted a case. Halligan convinced the grand jury to indict James on 2 counts related to alleged mortgage fraud. She's accused of obtaining a favorable mortgage on a house in Virginia by allegedly telling the bank she planned to use it as a secondary residence. Prosecutors claim she actually used it as a rental property. James says his case is about only one thing: retribution.
This is about all of us and about a justice system which has been weaponized. A justice system which has been used as a tool of revenge.
And Pierre Thomas joins us now. And Pierre, what else do we know about those on President Trump's so-called enemies list?
Well, James is the third nemesis of Trump to be indicted in less than a month, along with former FBI Director James Comey and former National Security Advisor John Bolton. And Alex, there are more names on the list and more investigations underway.
Pierre Thomas, thank you. And for more, we're joined in studio by ABC News legal analyst and Hofstra professor of law, James Sample. And James, first, thank you for your time. Thank you. But I think, for starters, what comes next here in James's case?
I think this case is going to be in essentially three separate cases. There's going to be the court of public opinion, and you saw Letitia James litigating in that court of public opinion today. You're certainly going to see that. We've already seen that from the president and the White House. Then you're going to get to a motions phase. The motions in this case, from the defense perspective, will involve whether or not Linsey Halligan, the new U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, was lawfully appointed. If she was not lawfully appointed, and that's a motion that James Comey has also filed, then it's possible that this indictment will be dismissed on that basis alone. She's also going to pursue a motion for vindictive or selective prosecution. Normally, that is a loser of a motion. It's a motion that defense counsel often file. Here, however, when you've got the President of the United States singling someone out, saying things in a press conference about that defendant, tweeting about her, all of that material, you have a kind of smoking gun that you normally would never, ever have. And then the merits phase. The merits phase involves a case that we know for a fact via reporting that the career line prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia did not feel was a winnable case. So now the fact that the Justice Department is pursuing that case, I think you're going to see a merits phase that really focuses on the debate as to whether or not this is really a case that could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Now, is that why you believe there might be some contradictions in this indictment?
Well, I think that the indictment contradicts the findings of the prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia. But those prosecutors have been fired because they chose not to bring this case. So Linsey Halligan has essentially been installed for the purpose of bringing this case, the James Comey case, perhaps others. And the ultimate merits debate here, it boils down to a question of whether or not Letitia James occupied her property, this second property in Virginia, when she visited it during the daytime when her niece was living there, or whether occupancy requires staying overnight. Now, James did not receive rent, did not receive rental income. In fact, the very amount of money here is very, very minimal. It's a de minimis thing, but the president and the White House and the Eastern District of Virginia are turning it into a major federal case.
Now, you brought up those prosecutors who had been fired. There were others who stepped down ahead of this indictment. What do you think that says in a case like this?
It says that the Department of Justice has a memorandum, has a policy on its in its guidance that says that the DOJ does not bring cases unless there is confidence that they can get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. It says that the line prosecutors did not think this was a meritorious case. Now, we don't know if during the discovery phase, the defense counsel will absolutely try to get that memo. If they can get that memo, it will be unbelievably persuasive evidence to present to a jury and say, look, not even the prosecutors felt that they had a case. Why should you say beyond a reasonable doubt that they do?
Let's take a look at this enemies list thus far. So you've got the AG, Letitia James. You've got James Comey. You've got John Bolton. I'm curious, crystal ball here. I mean, what do you think the chances are that any subsect or none of these cases actually make it to trial?
I think that the John Bolton case is in a different category. There's more substance there. You know, the indictment in the James Comey case, the indictment in the Letitia James case, if you sort of read them and compare them, if you blink, you might miss the indictment. That's how short they are. That's how thin they are. The one with John Bolton is a more serious matter. Now, it may also still be pursued because of retribution and because of revenge. There's not much question that it's also that, but it seems like there's at least some substance there.
All right, Professor Sample, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And next tonight, a major election here in New York City is just 10 days away. Candidate Zohran Mamdani today with an emotional speech decrying the increasing racist rhetoric against him. Trevor Alt reports.
Tonight in an emotional speech, Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, the frontrunner in the race for New York City mayor, declaring that despite recent attacks from his opponents, he will not run from his Muslim faith, pointing out 1 million Muslims live in this city, and they are New Yorkers like everyone else.
Will we remain in the shadows, or will we together step into the light?
Mamdani responding to this moment, his rival, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, laughing when a radio host said Mamdani would likely cheer on another 9/11 attack.
God forbid another 9/11. Can you imagine Mamdani in the seat?
Hey, I could. He'd be cheering.
another problem. But can you imagine that?
Today, Mamdani calling out those comments.
Yesterday, Andrew Cuomo laughed and agreed when a radio host said that I would cheer another 9/11.
Saying New York Muslims have been forced to live in the shadows.
The dream of every Muslim is simply be treated the same as any other New Yorker. And yet for too long, we have been told to ask for less than that and to be satisfied with whatever little we receive. No more.
Hours later, Cuomo firing back, accusing Mamdani of dividing people, calling him an actor and citing his outspoken views on the war between Israel and Hamas.
He is not the victim. He is the offender.
Mamdani insisting he will stay true to himself.
There are 12 days remaining until Election Day. I will be a Muslim man in New York City each of those 12 days and every day that follows after that. I will not change who I am, how I eat, or the faith that I am proud to call my own.
And Alex, today one of the nation's most powerful Democrats, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, endorsed Zohran Mamdani. And a lot of Mamdani supporters have been asking what the holdup was as he defeated Andrew Cuomo to win the Democratic nomination nearly 4 months ago. Alex?
Trevor, thank you. The tropical storm Melissa is gaining strength in the Atlantic tonight, on course to become a major hurricane by tomorrow and a Category 4 by Sunday night. Jamaica bracing for flooding, mudslides, and power outages. So let's get right to Chief Meteorologist Lee Goldberg from our New York station, WABC. Lee, what can you tell us?
Well, Alex, Melissa is beginning to strengthen. It's almost been like a plane taxiing on the runway for a few days, and now it's ready for takeoff. And unfortunately, the new track from the Hurricane Center is sobering, and then it's a worst-case scenario for Jamaica. So 65-mile-per-hour storm, but if you notice, thunderstorms are now developing around the center. That's a sign of strengthening. It looks more symmetrical, and you can see as we go through the weekend, we've got a hurricane tomorrow, then a rapid intensification to a major hurricane on Sunday, and then a track that either parallels the Jamaican coast and then potentially goes over Jamaica as a high-end Cat 4 as we go through the end of the weekend into early next week, and then it goes on to Cuba. So with that slow of a development, you've got tremendous rains going to Hispaniola. I mean, we could be measuring the rain in feet here in parts of Haiti and into Jamaica over the course of a few days. Our tropical models, there's more consensus now over Cuba and the Bahamas into Wednesday and Thursday, and then out in the Atlantic. There is the possibility it slows down some coastal systems that'll be on the East Coast next week. We'll be tracking that. But at this point, a devastating track for Jamaica and Hispaniola. Alex?
All right, Lee. Thank you. Next tonight, to the alarming scene outside a Coast Guard base in California. Police opening fire during a protest. A U-Haul truck backing up into the gate. 2 people injured. ABC's Kana Whitworth reports from California.
This is the Coast Guard. This is the moment federal agents open fire on a U-Haul backing up toward them before speeding away from this Coast Guard base near San Francisco.
Is anyone injured? Is anybody hit?
The Coast Guard says officers opened fire after the driver ignored verbal commands to stop. That driver wounded, according to Homeland Security, who says a protester was also struck by a fragment. That shooting coming after a day of clashes. Protesters tried to block Border Patrol vehicles arriving at the base as agents used flashbangs to disperse the crowd.
Back it up right now!
DHS says protesters attacked and were given a warning to clear the street, but refused to move. A pastor seen here standing with a sign when an agent fires a flashbang from just a few feet away. That minister, helped by others at the scene.
I obviously was shocked with whatever that Border Patrol had directly to my face. In that case, they're saying we're here in peace and he didn't care.
Yesterday, President Trump called off a planned surge of agents to San Francisco, at least for now. But this week, clashes escalating in cities like New York and Chicago, where Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino was seen allegedly hurling a tear gas canister. A judge ordering him to appear in court over the use of force. Today, the Department of Homeland Security defending his actions, saying the chief had been hit in the head by protesters launching commercial fireworks. And Alex, authorities tell us that the incident at the California Coast Guard base is isolated. They say it also highlights an alarming increase in claims of vehicle ramming attacks against federal agents. The suspect in this case has been released from the hospital and is now in custody. Alex.
Our thanks to Kana Whitworth for that report. And the semi-truck driver charged in the deadly chain reaction crash on the 10 freeway in California made his first court appearance this morning. Joshin Singh pleaded not guilty to multiple criminal counts he is facing, including driving under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Dashcam video shows Singh driving at high speed into traffic. The crash left 3 people dead. DHS said Singh entered the U.S. illegally from India in 2022 and issued an immigration arrest detainer on the suspect. The 21-year-old remains in custody without bail. And a Florida judge in the civil case brought against Andrew Tate and his brother has dismissed the Jane Doe's counterclaims related to human trafficking and coercion. A lawyer representing Jane Doe, who was one of the accusers in the Romanian human trafficking and sex abuse trial, told ABC News that they intend to amend their counterclaims and that their claim of defamation were not dismissed against the Tates. The Tates also face a criminal case in the UK on charges of trafficking, rape, and bodily harm. And coming up after the break, the latest turn in that shocking Burning Man murder. Plus, the important numbers to know about inflation and how it will impact your wallet the coming months. And a heart-stopping moment after a man escapes getting crushed by a boulder. The latest inflation report was released today after being delayed because of the government shutdown. And the new data shows that inflation is up compared to a year before. Slightly lower than economists expected, but still higher than the inflation the month before. So let's take a look at this new report by the numbers. Inflation is up 3% compared to a year ago, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that is the highest inflation level since January. It's a slight increase from the annual inflation rate in August of 2.9%. The report said prices overall rose by 0.3% for the month of September, with gas prices especially surging by 4.1% over the month. Among the biggest price increases over the past year, coffee, which rose by nearly 19% from September of last year. Also beef and veal, which saw an almost 15% increase in prices. Now, as for the price of eggs, which is often a symbol of rising prices, that's actually down 1% from a year ago. But Moody's Analytics says the average American household is spending $208 more per month for the same goods and services compared to a year ago, and $1,043 more per month than at the start of 2021 coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic because of inflation. Now, the stock market finished the week at an all-time high following a mild inflation report. The Dow gaining 472 points and closed above 47,000 for the first time ever. And for more on this report, we're joined by Martha Gimbel, the executive director and co-founder of the Yale Budget Lab. Martha, thank you so much for hanging out with us on a Friday night. And listen, as we mentioned, inflation is still up, but not as much as economists predicted. So, help us make sense of this number of these numbers. I mean, what should people really kind of take away from this?
So on the one hand, it could be worse. On the other hand, we would like it to be much, much better. If you look at the year-over-year inflation numbers, as you said, it came in about 3%. We're aiming for a little over 2% here. So it's substantially above where the Federal Reserve wants it to be. And frankly, it's substantially above what, we were all used to before the pandemic. And so, if you're going to the grocery store, if you're trying to provide for your family and you keep thinking, wow, these prices seem really high. Yeah, we're all on the same page.
Well, and of course, this comes as President Trump implements new tariffs. How much do you think those tariffs impacted these numbers?
Yeah, the tariffs are playing a role here. We can look at categories of goods that are affected, and they're up more than we would have expected them to be before the tariffs were put in place. You mentioned coffee earlier. Coffee is a great example of something that is tariffed and that we can't really provide here in the United States. And so tariffs on coffee mean that we're all going to be paying a lot more for coffee, which I, for one, struggle with as a caffeine addict.
Yeah, you and me both.
But I think the thing that we all need to keep in mind is that we have not yet felt the full impact of the tariffs. They get phased in over time. And so it is not simply the case that any price increases that we've seen fully bake in all of the tariffs. Economists are agreed there are more price increases to come.
Yeah. Well, President Trump is traveling to Asia, where he's expected to engage in trade talks with China's President Xi Jinping. Meanwhile, last night, he canceled trade talks with Canada over that anti-tariff television ad. I'm curious, how much of an impact could these negotiations or canceled talks have on inflation going forward?
Yeah, I mean, the canceled negotiations with Canada don't really have that much of an immediate impact. There's nothing that's going on there that's going to make a difference immediately. You know, with China, there's been a bunch of back and forth. On the one hand, he said that he's going to stand strong. On the other hand, just a few days ago, he told us all not to worry about it and it will all be okay. So we'll have to see where we land. But I think the fact that I don't have a clear answer for you on this is part of the problem. It is very difficult for businesses to respond to this environment when they don't know what tariffs they're going to be facing tomorrow, much less next week or the month or next year. And so that's really, really hard for businesses to figure out how to optimize their supply chains and get goods to Americans in the most cost-effective way possible.
Well, and I recognize this could be broad, but aside from tariffs and negotiations, what other factors do you see as possibly influencing prices in the coming months?
I mean, one thing you're going to see is, with the Federal Reserve looking to cut interest rates, they're trying to support a weakening labor market, but it's also possible that inflation takes off again. So we'll have to see how that goes. Would be remiss not to mention immigration. Immigration makes a huge difference in the cost of goods, particularly for things like care. If you're trying to find childcare or elder care, those are sectors that are really dependent on immigrants. Costs in the construction industry. And so, we will see how those sectors respond in the months to come as fewer and fewer immigrants come to the United States.
All right, Martha Gimbel, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And coming up after the break, the investigation into that shocking homicide at this year's Burning Man Festival and the questions that still remain. And new body camera video shows how the arrest of former NFL quarterback Jay Cutler unfolded last year. Welcome back. A mysterious and horrific crime made even more baffling due to its venue, Burning Man, the epic gathering of music, art, and self-expression in the Nevada desert. This year's event was rocked by a stabbing death of a 37-year-old artist who friends say disappeared as the symbolic man went up into flames. So what happened? Here's our Ashin Singh.
This is Burning Man, an epic gathering of creativity, community, and radical self-expression. Every year, tens of thousands converging here on Nevada's Black Rock Desert.
It's flat, it's like salt, very light dust, and it's really beautiful.
The festival drawing some of the hottest DJs in the world, like John Summit, who performed this year. Celebrity burners include Susan Sarandon, Heidi Klum, and Katy Perry, all of them posting their Burning Man adventures on Instagram. Also making the pilgrimage to the playa, tech titans of Silicon Valley. The pinnacle, the burning of the man itself, an effigy set ablaze, symbolizing release and rebirth. But this year, a dark twist, the event's first recorded homicide.
Now to this homicide investigation at the popular Burning Man Festival. Police say that he was found lying in a pool of blood.
The 37-year-old artist found dead.
He was very soulful person, very passionate, very high conscious being.
You don't have camera, you don't have witnesses. You have this having occurred in a remote area of Burning Man. Everything is working against the authorities here.
Vadim Kruglov, a Russian-born resident of Washington State and New York City, felt the spirit of Burning Man calling to him, going for this first time this year.
Vadim was so creative, brave, and honest person. He all-time positive, all-time helping people.
Sofia Sherbakova and Anna Rode are friends and influencers. This was their first trip to Burning Man. Sofia, Anna, and Vadim setting up camp together. Vadim, who they met through the close-knit Russian community, helped build a signature piece of art for their campsite, Luminary Love, called Mirror Heart.
First, we wanted to make art, and then Vadim One day he made a beautiful design. You know, we knew each other not too long, but when you're in an adventure and when you make something big together, you almost like many years already.
You become connected.
Yeah, you connected.
The group discovered a world of self-proclaimed burners, expressing themselves through art, music, fashion, and exotic custom vehicles.
People feel really free to wear clothes or not wear clothes and have like incredible fashion or nothing at all.
On the 7th day of Burning Man, Saturday, August 30th, almost everyone gathers for the climactic torching of the effigy that night.
As the thing gets going, it gets more and more and more and more festive and energetic, and there's just a lot of like cheering and celebration as the thing finally comes down to the ground.
But after the fire died down, Vadim's friends noticed he was missing.
I asked, guys, where is our friend? Why he not there? I like, guys, no, it's not normal because person not come back. He has his tent, his baggage, and he not back. I feel something strange.
Word had spread. Something was seriously wrong.
We were given a report of a body found, possibly deceased, quite a few streets away from where the majority of the population was.
When police arrived, the report of a body was confirmed, found in the far reaches of the camp.
A burner flags one of the law enforcement officers at the festival down, and they find a man laying in a pool of blood with a knife sticking out of his neck. They don't know who he is at the time, but they know that this looks like foul play.
Soon, the worst was confirmed on September 1st. The Pershing County Sheriff's Department announced a homicide was committed. 2 days later, authorities identified the body as Vadim's.
I was shocked because he's Russian. Like, it's the first murder from Burning Man. First, the Burning Man alive for almost 40 years.
Vadim's killing, sending shockwaves through the Russian-American community and the wider world of Burning Man. Black Rock City, which sits on federal land in Nevada, is under the jurisdiction of Pershing County.
Pershing County is really a small community, rural, agricultural. When Burning Man gets here every year, it increases the population by more than tenfold.
Bryce Shields is the district attorney. As investigators search for Vadim's killer, the extreme nature of the festival posing a challenge.
Does that complicate this investigation, given that this is a desert where the crime scene is no longer?
We're dealing with a city that's ephemeral, right? I mean, it evaporates a day or two after the burning of the effigy.
The first question police ask these days are there cameras? Here you have a situation where you don't have security cameras, even to get a car, to get a license plate, anything. Here, you got nothing.
The sheriff's department stating that Vadim was killed from a stab wound to his neck by a kitchen knife, providing a photo of the type of knife used. No suspects have yet been named, and no arrests have been made. The Burning Man organization cooperating with investigators, releasing an official statement reading in part, "Our hearts go out to Vadim's family and friends, and we grieve the loss of a community member. Burning Man Project is doing everything we can to assist the sheriff's investigation so the perpetrator can be caught and brought to justice." But Vadim Kruglov's friends and family aren't giving up. His father posting a video on social media from Russia asking for help. District Attorney Shields is not giving up either.
Friends and family of Vadim believe that he was in fact murdered. What's your message to them, given where we are now?
First and foremost, I would convey my condolences to his family. I would promise them that we're going to do our very best to solve this crime and to hold that person accountable and get justice for Vadim.
at a Russian Orthodox church in New York. Friends of Vadim gathering for a service. The tight-knit group remembering his energy, style, and sense of humor, while marking 40 days since his passing.
Vadim was such a bright and unique, authentic personality that life was brimming from him. That's the heartbreaking part, because I think he was such a tremendous potential.
Vadim's community keeping candles lit for him and still hoping to find answers to what happened in that desert that took their friend from them far too soon.
He was very old school Russian. You know, he worked hard, he played hard, and he prayed hard.
I still feel like he is very alive, such a living soul. Not many people who are living right now are so alive as he was.
Our thanks to Ashin Singh for that report, and be sure to catch the full episode on Impact by Nightline, streaming now on Disney Plus and Hulu. And when we come back, Social Security recipients are getting a bump, but is it enough to make a difference? Plus, booked and busy, Ethan Hawke has 2 movies in theaters and a TV series as well. He talks to our Linsey Davis about what he describes as his most difficult role to date in the new film, Blue Moon. New body cam video shows the moment a former NFL quarterback was arrested for a DUI, the bump for Social Security recipients, and the top honor for Bad Bunny at the Billboard Latin Music Awards. Those stories and more in tonight's Rundown. We're getting new video of former NFL quarterback Jay Cutler's DUI arrest outside Nashville. Police body camera footage shows Cutler in handcuffs in October of last year after he rear-ended a car. In the video, he admits to drinking alcohol and refuses a sobriety test. Police say Cutler tried to leave the scene and bribe another driver not to call 911. Cutler pleaded guilty to DUI and served 3 days in jail, according to the Williamson County Sheriff's Office. In Philadelphia today, law enforcement took down a large drug trafficking organization. The FBI director, Kash Patel, on hand, thanked everyone involved in the operation.
This Weymouth Street Gang is not just one instance of removing a couple of people. It is an example of how you remove an entire organization that is corrupting not just the city of Philadelphia, but the state of Pennsylvania as well.
There are 33 defendants, 29 of them currently in custody. Dozens of firearms, including assault rifles, and what's being called a tremendous quantity of fentanyl and narcotics recovered. The U.S. Attorney says the indictment unsealed today is the largest case ever brought by the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Social Security recipients will get a 2.8% cost of living boost next year, but many seniors say higher prices will eat away all of that increase. The average senior on Social Security will get on average $56 a month more in 2026. In heart-stopping moments, a man narrowly escapes getting crushed by a boulder in Turkey. A taxi driver was parked outside a restaurant when a landslide sent a massive rock crashing down a hill. The man dashing out of the way with only seconds to spare, that boulder missing him by just a few feet. And another career highlight for superstar Bad Bunny, as Rita Moreno presented him with the Billboard Latin Music Award for Top Latin Artist of the 21st Century. Taking home 11 awards in total, it caps off a 2-month residency in his native Puerto Rico. The Grammy-winning reggaeton artist is set to headline the Super Bowl halftime show in February. Tonight, the battle for the Commissioner's Trophy begins as the Los Angeles Dodgers look to repeat as World Series champions against the Toronto Blue Jays, who will seek their first MLB championship since going back-to-back in '92 and '93. The Dodgers are led by Japanese two-way superstar Shohei Ohtani, while the Jays aim to upset the reigning champs under the leadership of Canadian sports royalty Vladimir Guerrero Jr., whose Hall of Fame father famously played in Montreal for 8 seasons. It's the first World Series to take place in 2 different countries since 1993. And actor Ethan Hawke is everywhere these days. His new FX series, The Lowdown, a Western noir, premiered last month and is already a hit with viewers. And he's got not just 1, but 2 films in theaters right now, Black Phone 2 and what Prime anchor Linsey Davis just spoke to him about, Blue Moon, directed by Richard Linklater. Take a look.
I've been drinking ginger ale all night. Well, except for this second, because this second we have to celebrate. This is the greatest musical in the history of American theater. No, I'm not drinking with you, Larry. Okay, all right. Ouija, shoot this, huh?
What? Oh, no.
No.
Larry, I gotta...
Rogers and Hart, together again.
Ethan Hawke, such a pleasure to have the conversation with you. Thanks so much for making the time.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So you have quite a number of projects all coming out at the same time. Busy Man, The Lowdown, Blue Moon, Black Phone 2. How do you go from just project to project like that?
I feel like, you know those images of the old-time actors at their horse and carriage, and the carriage has all the costumes in the back, and they'd pull into a town and put on 5 plays over a weekend or something and drive away. That's kind of what I've been doing with my whole life.
You and Richard Linklater waited 12 years for you to age into this role of Lorenz Hart. During that time, during that long wait, how did that enhance, perhaps, your portrayal of Hart?
Oh, so much. Well, when I first started and I read the script, I didn't know that the Rogers and Hart Rogers was the same as the Rogers and Hammerstein. I didn't know that was the same man. I didn't know this story at all. I knew a little bit of Hart's music from just being a jazz fan. You know, I'd played Chet Baker and My Funny Valentine, The Lady's a Tramp, Blue Moon, obviously. They have a lot of classics, but the time period gave me to inundate myself with the music, become actually knowledgeable about that music. There's some wonderful pieces written about that era and that time, and it made it fun to do the research as opposed to panic.
Of course, Hart was a famed lyricist, but had died more than 80 years ago. What made you want to really take on his life?
No, I got you some flowers.
Aw. I'm overwhelmed.
Well, I have that effect on people.
There was something magic in the idea of this movie, to go to the opening night party of Oklahoma. It's this moment when America was changing. We're right in the middle of the war. The jazz age is being left behind. There's this new thing that's about to start happening. Oklahoma is a funny musical because we all know it. And of course, it's a musical that's nostalgic for a world that never existed. You know, and it's when America starts to see itself in the third person and narrativize itself as a hero. There's a lot that's extremely interesting to me about it.
Talk to us about the set. You actually appear smaller. Of course, you got the balding head. You're really not recognizable. This seems like quite a departure from the typical roles that we see you play. How was it that all of these pieces that come together to help you really embody Lorenz Hart?
It was so much fun. I was basically like, I've spent 30 years acting, and each job I kind of learned one little tool to put in my toolkit, you know, and then this movie required all of them to be in use, you know, from voice and speech to hair and makeup to characterization, body and movement. Everything they try to teach you in theater school is like, oh, this job needs it all. And so I loved it. It's definitely the hardest I ever worked.
Is that right? Why so?
The physical stuff, trying to do the height. You know, Lorenz Hart is a foot shorter than I am. And it's a really important part of his character because he can't stop talking, and his relationship to the world, he kind of feels if he stops talking, no one will see him. You know, he thinks he's being ignored all the time.
I want 10 copies of that.
Great. Write me a check.
And then he has arthritis. He's a bad alcoholic. So there's all the physical elements. And then the simple verbiage, the amount of text I had to memorize.
Yes.
We had 15 days to shoot it, you know, so I was never not working.
Obviously, you have a history of working on Broadway. How did that really help? Because it felt like this was a play.
The history of theater and movies and things tells us because it's in one place, it could be a play. What's beautiful about it being a movie is the intimacy and putting what cinema can do is actually put you at the party. And so I do love the theater. I did my first professional play when I was 12 years old. I've been at a ton of opening night parties. I know the energy and the vibe in the room, what that's like. It feels life and death. And in a way, it is, professionally.
I have to say, too, so impressive, the dialogue, because really, there was a point for maybe 30 straight minutes. It felt like we were just hearing from your character.
Yeah, he cannot stop talking. I felt like, when I was playing it, I felt like he's a man who's in front of a firing squad. You know?
And as long as he has words.
As long as he has words, they're not going to shoot. And the second he loses his language, he's dead.
The head has nothing to do with the madness of love.
Talk to us about FX's The Lowdown.
Yeah.
You play the character Lee in this crime drama who describes himself as a truth historian. What made you become interested in playing this role?
Well, Sterling Harjo is, I always say Harjo like he's some French filmmaker. It's Harjo. And he's an amazing artist. And I loved Reservation Dogs. And I thought, I really want to work with this person. And we created this whole show. And the show, I just love it. You say true story, and that's what my character describes himself as. And he's a hot mess. You know, I mean, true story is not even a word, but he has a point, which is where history and truth intersect.
Sure.
And if you don't, you know, sunlight is the best disinfectant. You got to tell the truth or you don't understand where you're at.
Let's just say that I am obsessed with the truth.
So I fell in love with this character, and I highly recommend the show.
We highly recommend it as well. I think that one thing that we see, kind of a common thread with Blue Moon and also The Lowdown, is this kind of attraction to telling these stories of Americana, right? Which we've seen you play in those kinds of roles quite often. What draws you into these kinds of stories?
Well, I feel like it's my job. The artistic community is kind of the collective consciousness of a nation. And if our health is good, it's kind of like the mental health. When the arts thrive, it's a sign that the mental health of a country and a society and a culture is strong.
Of course, Sinister, The Purge, Black Phone, and now the sequel. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you got to have some fun too. You know, part of a movie's job is to be fun. So I like a good scary movie.
And so is it kind of just the entertainment, the shock factor that it has drawn you into that horror genre?
I've never had more fun in my life than being with a group of friends watching a scary movie. There's something that brings you together about it. There's something about the popcorn flying in the air, or maybe when I was younger, having a young woman clutch my arm and feel like, it's okay, we're going to get through this. You know, I mean, there's something about it that I just love. And so Scott Derrickson directed all the ones that I've done, and he's a brilliant guy. You know, it's funny, up there's a picture of the Scottish play, aka Macbeth, and that's the original scary movie, right? Whenever theater companies in the old days needed to make money, you put on Macbeth, and everybody comes.
That's right. Ethan Hawke, we love to watch you, and whether it's movies, play, shows, thank you so much for what you do.
Well, I love doing it, so thank you.
A busy man indeed. Our thanks to Linsey for that. And you can watch Ethan Hawke as Lorenz Hart in Blue Moon in theaters nationwide today. You can also see him every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. on FX's critically acclaimed series, The Lowdown, also streaming the next day on Hulu. And coming up, we'll have more on the Trump administration's latest move as it cracks down on alleged drug boats coming into the U.S. And White House renovations are well underway. We're joined by a former member of the Reagan administration who knows that building very well to discuss the plans. We begin tonight with the Trump administration and a major show of force in its military crackdown on suspected drug boats allegedly headed to the U.S. The Pentagon is now deploying an entire aircraft carrier group to the waters off of Central and South America. The move comes hours after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth posted new video showing the latest strike on an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean. At least 6 people were killed. The boat said to be out of Venezuela. It is the 3rd such attack this week and the 10th since the operation began last month. The USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Group is headed to the region with thousands of U.S. troops on board. Sources telling ABC News 2 B-1 bombers flew missions over the Caribbean yesterday, and last week 3 B-52s were operating in international waters off of Venezuela. President Trump previously said he was not ruling out possibly using ground attacks against suspected cartels and drug traffickers. Chief Global Affairs anchor Martha Raddatz leads us off.
Tonight, a U.S. aircraft carrier and multiple warships now steaming towards the Caribbean. A dramatic escalation in what President Trump calls his war on drug cartels. This as a deadly new airstrike obliterated a suspected drug boat. Secretary Pete Hegseth posting video of that overnight attack, the boat taking a direct hit, exploding in flames. Hegseth saying at least 6 people were killed, claiming without evidence the boat was being operated by Tren de Aragua, a designated terrorist organization. It's the 10th known military attack on alleged drug boats, including 2 in the eastern Pacific Ocean off Central America. And tonight, the orders for that new, ferocious show of force. The USS Ford Carrier Strike Group heading to the region. That carrier, bristling with firepower, including F-18 fighter jets, missile launchers, and attack submarines, adding some 5,000 American forces to the 10,000 already in the region. President Trump, who has said land attacks could be next, pressed if he will seek a declaration of war.
I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country.
While the vast majority of Republican lawmakers support the president's actions against cartels, concern is growing.
You can't randomly just blow up the enemy without identifying them and accusing them of crime unless you're at war.
Our thanks to Martha Raddatz for that. And next tonight, an escalation of a different kind. President Trump cutting off trade talks with Canada. The president furious over an anti-tariff ad airing in the U.S. featuring former President Ronald Reagan. And it comes amid a new report showing inflation climbing to 3% last month compared to a year ago. Americans now paying more for beef, coffee, and produce. President Trump had campaigned on lowering prices. Here's Elizabeth Schulze.
Tonight, President Trump abruptly launching a new trade war with Canada, declaring all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. The president infuriated by this ad produced by the province of Ontario, which uses the words of former President Ronald Reagan.
High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars.
Trump posting accusing Canada of trying to illegally influence the United States Supreme Court, which is set to hear arguments in 2 weeks on whether the president's sweeping tariffs are constitutional. Canada's prime minister sounding resigned.
We can't control the trade policy of the United States.
Trump's tariffs are now beginning to affect the prices we pay for everything from furniture to clothes to groceries. A new government report shows inflation is picking up, prices increasing 3% from last year. The typical American household is now spending an extra $208 per month. Trina Duda, a mother of a second grader, says she's feeling it.
This gallon of milk is $2 more than it was.
Like a month ago, yeah.
At the grocery store, tariffs are hitting imported foods. Coffee prices surging 41% in the past year. Lettuce up 21%. Sirloin steak up 20%.
How much did you pay for your groceries today?
$55.
More or less than last month?
Maybe 5 or 10% more.
That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, I'm not happy with it.
It comes as the government shutdown drags into day 24 with no end in sight. Today, more than 500,000 workers missed their first full paycheck, many of them employees at the Pentagon, HHS, and the VA. Another 700,000 plus people will miss their first full paycheck next week. At this food bank in Alexandria, Virginia, a furloughed worker at the Department of Defense telling us that she feels like a pawn in the game.
This distribution is happening every Friday as long as the government shutdown happens.
Furious that lawmakers are getting their paychecks, but she's not.
They need to go without a paycheck. They need to get low on food so they can understand what we're dealing with. It's not fair. It's just not fair.
Our thanks to Elizabeth for that report. And the Pentagon says that it has accepted an anonymous $130 million donation to help pay troops as the government shutdown continues. A bill expected to cost around $6.8 billion. A spokesperson did not answer questions about how it would distribute the money, but said that the donation was made on the condition that it be used to offset the cost of service members' salaries and benefits. There are 2 million service members, and we are now in day 24 of the shutdown. New York Attorney General Letitia James has pleaded not guilty to federal charges of bank fraud and making false statements in Virginia. James, one of President Trump's top targets, is accusing him of using the Justice Department as a tool of revenge. Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas has the latest.
Tonight, a defiant New York Attorney General Letitia James pleading not guilty to federal charges after President Trump urged his Justice Department to go after her.
So there's no fear today. No fear. No fear. No fear. No fear. Because I believe that justice will rain down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream.
James, a target of the president ever since she brought a $500 million civil fraud case against Trump and his family. Trump publicly urged Attorney General Pam Bondi to prosecute her.
It looks to me like she's very guilty of something, but I really don't know.
The veteran prosecutor investigating James determined there was not enough evidence to bring charges, so Trump forced him out, quickly installing his own former personal attorney, Lindsey Halligan, an insurance attorney who has never prosecuted a case. Halligan convinced the grand jury to indict James on 2 counts related to alleged mortgage fraud. She's accused of obtaining a favorable mortgage on a house in Virginia by allegedly telling the bank she planned to use it as a secondary residence. Prosecutors claim she actually used it as a rental property. James says his case is about only one thing: retribution.
This is about all of us and about a justice system which has been weaponized. A justice system which has been used as a tool of revenge.
And Pierre Thomas joins us now. And Pierre, what else do we know about those on President Trump's so-called enemies list?
Well, James is the third nemesis of Trump to be indicted in less than a month, along with former FBI Director James Comey and former National Security Advisor John Bolton. And Alex, there are more names on the list and more investigations underway.
Pierre Thomas, thank you.
Pleasure.
Joining me now to talk more about President Trump's White House renovation is someone who knows that building very well, former President Reagan's Social Secretary Gail Burt. Gail, thank you so much for your time. And I want to start. These renovations are focused on the east wing of the White House complex. And so, as someone who spent a lot of time in that building, what typically goes on in that part of the White House?
Well, that part of the White House houses the First Lady's offices, her press office, and her social office. It houses the White House Visitor's Office, which is a highly underappreciated part of the White House. They organize all of the tours of the White House. And I think the White House is the only residence of a sitting head of state in the world where tours go on every day 2 floors beneath where he and she live. So it is the people's house. It has never stopped being the people's house. And so the White House Visitor's Office organizes all of those tours. They're housed there. And the White House Military Liaison Office is there. They liaison directly with the Department of War/Defense. And coordinate White House defense issues.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned those tours. I've taken one of those tours. But Gail, the Trump administration has been hinting at this for a while, and the president himself seems to be personally involved in the design of this new ballroom. I'm curious, what do you make of these plans?
Well, I haven't seen them. I've seen renderings. Mm-hmm. What I can tell you is that it is desperately needed. I fully support this project. I would love to see the plans. I hope that this new structure does not dwarf the current White House. The proper main White House. It's a historic piece of ground in the United States of America. So I'm hoping that it is all in keeping with what is already there.
Well, and you talked about the size. It's a 90,000 square foot ballroom here. And there were others that would also point out what they would say was a massive price tag as well, spending roughly $300 million to demolish parts of a historical building and build a new one. But you believe that in spite of that, this is absolutely necessary.
It is absolutely necessary. People would be shocked to know that there is no kitchen on the state floor. So everything is cooked in the basement of the White House in a tiny kitchen. It is sent up in dumbwaiters. It is erected in a hallway. The food is assembled in a hallway off the state dining room. Look, the building was built in 1792. It was not built for a global superpower's a form of entertaining and hosting.
As I say, it is the people's house. Gail Burt, thank you so much for your time tonight.
You're welcome.
A Delta flight was forced to abort from takeoff from Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. Flames seen shooting from the right engine. The plane speeding down the runway with flames bursting from under the wing. Emergency crews raced to the aircraft, and passengers flying to Portland were placed on another flight. Luckily, nobody was hurt. And next tonight, a major election here in New York, less than 2 weeks away. Candidate Zohran Mamdani today with an emotional speech decrying the increasing racist rhetoric against him. Trevor Ault reports.
Tonight, in an emotional speech, Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani, the frontrunner in the race for New York City mayor, declaring that despite recent attacks from his opponents, he will not run from his Muslim faith, pointing out 1 million Muslims live in this city, and they are New Yorkers like everyone else.
Will we remain in the shadows, or will we together step into the light?
Mamdani responding to this moment, his rival, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, laughing when a radio host said Mamdani would likely cheer on another 9/11 attack.
God forbid another 9/11. Can you imagine Mamdani in the seat?
Hey, I could. He'd be cheering.
It's another problem. But can you imagine that?
Today, Mamdani calling out those comments.
Yesterday, Andrew Cuomo laughed and agreed when a radio host said that I would cheer another 9/11.
Saying New York Muslims have been forced to live in the shadows.
The dream of every Muslim is simply be treated the same as any other New Yorker. And yet for too long, we have been told to ask for less than that and to be satisfied with whatever little we receive. No more.
Hours later, Cuomo firing back, accusing Mamdani of dividing people, calling him an actor and citing his outspoken views on the war between Israel and Hamas.
He is not the victim. He is the offender.
Mamdani insisting he will stay true to himself.
There are 12 days remaining until Election Day. I will be a Muslim man in New York City each of those 12 days and every day that follows after that. I will not change who I am, how I eat, or the faith that I am proud to call my own.
Our thanks to Trevor for that report. And the Trump administration has finalized plans to open the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to oil and gas drilling. The decision, announced by the U.S. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, paves the way for possible development in lease sales on the coastal plain, considered sacred by indigenous communities that live around it. The plans have increasingly sparked controversy, as this is the largest remaining tract of wilderness in the country, spanning over 1.5 million acres. The land is also a critical habitat for caribou, polar bears, and other wildlife. And tonight, the stock market finishing the week at an all-time high following a mild inflation report. The Dow gaining 472 points, closing above 47,000 for the first time ever. And new records for the NASDAQ as well, up 263 points, closing at 23,204. And the S&P 500 adding 53 points, closing at a record 6791, making it a clean sweep. And coming up after the break, Ecuador's president claims someone recently tried to poison him. We'll tell you what he said happened. And a famed Picasso painting, long off the market and out of view. We're tracking several headlines around the world. Ecuador's president, Daniel Noboa, is alleging someone attempted to poison him by putting toxic substances in gifts he received, specifically jams and chocolates. But he has yet to provide any evidence of the alleged poisoning. This is the second assassination attempt Noboa says he's been the victim of, and it comes on the heels of ongoing indigenous protests against his administration. And this vivid Pablo Picasso portrait of his longtime muse and partner, Dora Maar, just sold at auction for nearly $37 million in Paris. It was painted in 1943 and purchased privately the following year, remaining off the market and out of view for 8 decades. Art historians point to the underlying emotion in the bold work, with Picasso's lover appearing to hold back tears. And after the stunning jewelry heist made in broad daylight at the Louvre, the internet wants to know just who is this dapper Dan randomly photographed at the scene of the robbery. AP photographer Thibaut Camus now saying this about the picture.
I think it's just a guy who passing by here, and that's it.
Nonetheless, the online buzz has been constant, generating millions of global views and reactions, though it's not clear who the well-dressed man is on the scene at any official capacity. The Paris prosecutor's office says that they prefer to keep the mystery alive before unmasking the man's identity. And coming up after the break, from scrubs to social media, we're talking with the other Taylor Lautner, who has quite a following herself. We turn now to our weekly segment, TikTok, where we take a closer look at the story behind the sensation. And from scrubs to social media, Tay Lautner is redefining what it means to care for others. A registered nurse turned digital creator, she's built a community of more than 2 million followers on TikTok, all focused on mental health and supporting one another. Take a look.
5, 6, 7, 8. Be gone. Don't make her too strong. Get back. Don't let my attack. Be gone. Don't make her too strong. Move. You can't be classy. Don't make them action.
Do you still remember those dance routines?
Yes, absolutely.
I bet. Tay, it's so good to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely, definitely. Well, okay, and so I want to dive in here because you have worn so many different hats, from a frontline registered nurse during the pandemic to a podcast host to a TikTok creator. But I'm curious, I mean, what's really motivated you to share your personal experience to get this message of well-being out?
Yeah, I mean, it really just stems from my personal experience working as a COVID nurse. I was diagnosed with severe depression and PTSD from working. And so I ended up having to take a step back from working in the hospital. And that's kind of where this whole mental health thing started. It's so funny because when people are like, what do you do for work? I'm like, well, I guess I started as a nurse, but I never know how to answer that question because there's a lot of hats, but it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, listen, by your side through all of this is your husband, the other Tay,
yes,
Taylor Lautner. And together, you guys co-host the Squeeze podcast, using the idea of when life gives you lemons, that saying. And so I'm curious, how are you helping others really kind of squeeze the juice out of these lemons?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've learned is how important community is. That was a big thing, obviously, during COVID. And I think more than ever, we're still really craving that human-to-human connection. Even just us sitting here today, I think is so important. And podcasts, I think, are a way for people to get that, even if they can't get it in person. And I think it's just so important to share what you have going on, especially as, you know, a public figure with a platform. I wanted to figure out a way to give back and help people when I left the hospital. And it's been the most rewarding, most fun thing ever.
Can I insert? We'll call this a version of a Tea Time with Tay icebreaker right now.
I love it.
So how does your family and your friends separate the two of you guys?
Yes, yeah. So we do Taylor and Tay, but there's also Boy Tay and Girl Tay is the friends, and they've even shortened it down to GT and BT. It's weird because I honestly feel like we know, even if someone says Tay, we know who they're we just kind of know who they're referring to. Yeah. That's so funny. That's so funny.
Well, okay. The other thing that I want to talk about is you founded the Lemons Foundation in 2022. It helps break the stigma around mental health. I'm curious, I mean, how has this allowed you to really kind of push past just the impact of social media? Yeah, I mean, I always say that if you were to Google, how do I better my mental health? It is so overwhelming. You don't know what link to click on. And then I feel like people just end up closing the tab and they don't do anything to take that next step. And so at the Lemons Foundation, that's really what we're all about, is making things digestible and accessible for people. And again, building that community. That's been the biggest thing, is hearing what they're doing for their mental health, self-care, even just stepping outside in the sun for 10 minutes a day. Something that is free, that you can do and is so accessible to most people, I think is really important and a very easy step to take in your self-care mental health journey. Tay, great advice indeed. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, and make sure to follow Tay Lautner on TikTok. She's at Mrs. Tay Lautner for all the humor, heart, and honesty. And that is our show for this half hour. I'm Alex Brachet. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thank you for streaming with us.